Yes, good morning. A warm welcome to all of us to this, our 6th Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference. Our second time to be here at Makerere University, and it's good to have this again home. Would like to kickstart this event with anthems. We will start with the Uganda anthem, the East Africa anthem, and the Makerere University anthem, and then we shall proceed.
Great, great and mighty,
Thank you very much, Department of Performing Arts and Film. And for Dr. Chigozi, thanks a lot for this. You can please take up your seats. Again, you're welcome to this, our 6th Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference. This is our 10th year of existence, and we're glad to have you here, our second time home. My name is Isaac Kiza Tiwasima. I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today with Dr. Danson Kahiana. I can't see him. Yeah, we are really, really grateful to have you here. I would like to recognize the presence of our chair of the board of the East African Literary, now this is confusing, Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Association, Professor Grace Musila. You're most welcome back home to Uganda. My head of department, Edgar Nabtanyi, it's good to see you. My dean, Professor Sauda Namyalo, you're most welcome. My boss, and people call her my mother, Professor Josephine Aichire, the principal of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, our Vice Chancellor and our Deputy Vice Chancellor today, Professor Henry Alinaito, you're most welcome. Our keynote speakers are in the house with us. You're most welcome. Professor Imani, Professor Ani, and Professor Kumu. You're most welcome. Our colleagues from all universities, from all departments around Uganda. We're really, really glad to see you here. Would like to kickstart this event with a speech, a little speech, I hope a really little one, from my teacher and friend and mentor, Dr. Susan Chiguli. You're most welcome.
The guest of honor, Mr. Bernard Mujoni, Commissioner, Equity and Rights, representing the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, the Vice Chancellor of this esteemed university to which I proudly belong, represented by Professor Henry Alinaito, principals and deans of various colleges and schools here present, especially my principal, Professor Josephine Ahichire, and we now call her in Luganda, Nabakenkufu, and my dean, Professor Sauda Namyalo Owechitibwa, from the Buganda government. Once Owechitibwa, you are always Owechitibwa. I hope you remember that. Owechitibwa means honorable. There should be a translator by my side, it seems like. The departmental chairs, officials and representatives from the various partner institutions, distinguished guests from foreign missions, our sponsors, invited guests in your various capacities, members of the press and social media influencers, conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the local organizing committee for the 6th Mashariki Eastern African Literary and Cultural Studies Conference, I'd like to welcome you all with much joy. I hope it shows on my face. With much joy, enthusiasm, and gratitude that you are all here with us. I am overwhelmed that this is happening right now. And the members of my organizing committee know that what I mean by I'm overwhelmed, that this is happening right now, and that we are all part of it in our different capacities. As you'll be reminded again and again, over the 3 days we will be gathered here under the watch of our Vice Chancellor. This is the second time the Mashariki Board has trusted us with the enviable task of hosting this conference. I know our head of department is going to thank you properly, But as the first speaker, I must mention that we are the first to have the privilege of hosting this conference series a second time round. It's therefore inevitable for us to feel a little special and elated at this chance to have Makerere play an active part in harnessing debate and encouraging discussions on literary and cultural matters in this region. The idea of a conference series, of which this is the 6th in line, came from Nairobi and South Africa, with these key people: Professor Grace Musila, who is here with us, Dr. Tomo Diambo, and Mr. Paselelo Kantai. We will always be grateful for their putting this idea into action, and we are especially proud of Professor Musila for making sure that the dream grew strong and supple wings. In a similar vein, I would like to thank my head of department, who is the Makerere convener, for giving me the responsibility to chair the local organizing committee with its legendary zero budget, and for making sure as chair of a finance committee that we managed. Somehow we survived. Dennis Brutus of South Africa. We cannot thank you enough, Dr. Nabutanyi, for your generosity of heart and wise leadership. You are greatly appreciated. And if you are here, you would say, Obugalo. I cannot, guest of honor, thank our organizing committee enough. And neither can I express enough gratitude to our conveners on the Mashariki board. I know there will be a moment in which somebody will painstakingly thank everybody, but still I'm compelled to say thank you and welcome together. The local organizing committee is amazing, and it is hard to know how to thank them so that they feel how so exceptional they are. Working with you has been such a wonderful and reassuring experience. I know most of us are running in and out, but I would like to mention the names of our unbeatable, or as our Kenyan family would say, unbogable, and steadfast, resolute team, starting with our head of department and chair finance committee, Dr. Edgar Nabutanyi. You may not see them, but I'm going to mention the names because some of us are here, some of us are not. Then our core committee, or what has become the buzzword these days, scientific committee, but I prefer CORE, C-O-R-E, principal. Core committee. Our core committee with me as chair is Dr. Isaac Tibasima, managing the secretariat and being our MC today, Dr. Danson Kayana, Dr. Eve Nabulia, Dr. Cindy Magara, and Ms. Jacqueline Adongo. The program committee is headed by Dr. Tibasima and Dr. Hayana, who are our MCs, and our publicity committee is headed by Ms. Rita Namisango. We have Ms. Jenna Nyango, Mr. Eric Lubega, and his team, and Professor Okelo Ogwang, who is indisposed and is unable to be here with us today. And then the welfare committee is headed by Dr. Eve Nabulia and Dr. Cindy Magara, Professor Bas Chiimba, Professor Dominica DiPio, and the venue committee is headed by Ms. Julian Namiyingo, Ms. Sophie Lacotte, Dr. Okot Benge, and the security committee, so you should be at ease. We have a security committee in this building. The security committee is headed by Ms. Jacqueline Adong. I must say that I'm facing my principal right here, and her face is very stern. So I don't know why she's always giving me a smile and supporting me before. I don't know today. what is going on. Mr. Aloysius Kwitonda is part of our security committee. And of course, Professor DPO and Professor Chimba, for reasons I'll not mention now because of time. I just can only nod in recognition of your giving the expression of exceptionally devoted and dedicated a new meaning. My minutes, as you may realize, are over now. And I would just like to say again how so very welcome you all are. And I would request that you clap for all of us for being here, because this is a good turn-up. All our delegates are, almost all of them are here. And I would like to say again how exceedingly delighted the local organizing committee of Makerere University is to have you all here with us. Indeed, we build for the future. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Professor Grace Musila to address the gathering. Professor Musila is the chair for the Mashariki board, and she will explain why Mashariki are not East African Literary and Cultural Studies Conference as it was before. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for that generous introduction, Dr. Chiguli. Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Henry Alinaitwe, the Dean of the School of Languages, Literature and Communications, Professor Sauda Namialo, Principal of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Josephine Ahichire, the Head of the Department of Literature, Dr. Edgar Nabutanye, and the representative of the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Mr. Bernard Mujuni, our keynote guests, colleagues and friends, greetings to you and a warm welcome to the 6th Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference. Mashariki is Kiswahili for the East. And so we thought in the spirit of Africa, in the spirit of capturing just our investedness in local epistemologies, including local languages, we thought it's appropriate for us to be named Mashariki, which also captures that East African spirit that we had the performing arts students sing about so beautifully earlier. I'd like to start by acknowledging 4 major African writers and scholars who transitioned to the ancestral realm this year. And these are Professor Michere Mugo, Mama Ama Ata Aido, Mwalimu John Nagenda, who is an alumni of the Department of Literature at Makerere University, Professor Kole Omotosho, among other colleagues that have transitioned in the course of this year. Each of these legends is a globally recognized writer and thinker whose work helped us make better sense of ourselves as Africans. And today I would like to celebrate the gift of their lives and work. So if you will indulge us just for a few minutes, we'd like to just honor and acknowledge the gift of these legends and writers' lives and work.
Biman dunia jai, bisa dunia mana, ini dunia lah paling. Ay dunia sih, dunia la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ati yakari yogo yambono amare meto ko tudai modi ni mbaraja nini mama anta salini anta allabata abone ndinchunu lanta ho bakai alla kana ko men khiri fere sunta yo anyimini ya mene warai kalle 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 man kisse wara ke kuna mare mo kharon nalla bato ye bani mare mo sidiela la ilaha illallah anga sidi kumboy sidiela la ilaha illallah anga sidi kumboy Sidiela, Garambura mafama, anga sidi kumboy. Sidiela, Garambura mafama, anga sidi kumboy. Ima dunia da bita dunia bana, wayo, yo ye man, wayo. Uloni ya kombo koto diwon si khule ya kombo Ismail Ale Belingale ya kombo Michel Bies Jankolo de ya kombo Abisira Chikole ya kombo Loyoloy Zainabu ya kombo Usman Touré Mulolu ya kombo Falolu ya kombo Musolu ya kombo Sidiela, la ilaha illallah, anga sidi kumboy. 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 Musulu yakumbo, Ismail yakumbo, Tijule yakumbo, Sidiela, la ilaha illallah, anga sidi kumbo. Sidiela, la ilaha illallah, anga sidi kumbo. Ona tuna kebedo daru, tuna festival. Wallahi tumo. Ona tuna lagarenya, komenti lagaru tu haron nana batu. Lata, alga tuji kumboy. Tutiela, sole lata, alga tuji kumboy. Dunia, yeah. Ismailale Belingale Yakumbo Michel Bies Jankolo de Yakumbo Abisira Chikole Yakumbo Loyoloy Zinabu Yakumbo Usman Ture Munolu Yakumbo Fanolu Yakumbo Musolu Yakumbo Sidiela 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 La ila ila la Alina Sidi Kumbo Sidiela Sidiela La ila ila la Alina Sidi Kumbo Sidiela Sidiela La ila ila la Alina Sidi Kumbo Sidiela Sidiela La ila ila la Alina Sidi Kumbo
Thank you so much. And I think many of us would recognize that in many African societies, our understanding of death is a transition. So we just wanted to honor these elders and many others that we may not have listed, and to celebrate the gifts that they leave us with, but also to acknowledge that we have just acquired new powerful ancestors on the other side. So our prayer is that they travel gently, and may we know how to expand the wisdom that they left us with. So the Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference series started in 2003, as you heard earlier, with our inaugural conference at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. And we are 10 years old this year, but in the interest of time, I'll not recount our life story so far. You can read about it on the first page of our program. I would just like to give thanks to all our previous and current conference conveners for believing in our vision enough to walk this journey with us. And it's not an easy journey, as many of us would know. We're incredibly proud of our achievements so far, among which we count 5 successful conferences hosted in East African countries and many academic publications that have stemmed from these conferences. As you'll note from the story of Mashariki in your program, we're not here to host conferences. Anybody can wake up and host a conference. We are here to reconfigure the landscape of knowledge production. We're here to build institutions and platforms of rigorous academic engagement that are rooted in East Africa and run from East Africa, but governed by a very strong Pan-Africanist ethics that recognizes our individual and collective responsibility to Africa. Like Makerere University, as you heard earlier, because the motto of Makerere University is building for the future, so like Makerere, we're very strongly invested in building for the future. And we want to tap into the interventions that the humanities and social sciences offer us in crafting livable futures that are attentive to our collective well-being and flourishing. We don't just want to survive, we want to flourish. And we are aware of the ongoing debates about artificial intelligence and the promises of technology in shaping our futures. But we're also convinced that these technologically fueled futures require modes of thinking and making sense of the world that only the humanities and social sciences can offer. And this conference series is about generating and sharing those insights that cannot be reproduced, they cannot be generated by AI. And our conviction is that this is where the humanities and social sciences can step up and supplement all our amazing technological developments that we're witnessing in the world today. I'd just like to close then by offering my deepest gratitude to all Mashariki board members whose commitment, integrity, and generosity over the years has made Mashariki a community we are all immensely proud of. And special thanks go to the heart and soul of Mashariki's success, Dr. Isaac Tibasima. Please join me in. So as I hand over to our incoming chairperson of the Mashariki board, Dr. Edgar Nabutanyi, who is also the current head of the Department of Literature at Makerere, I can confidently say that our future is exciting, and we hope that each of you will continue to build with us. Karibuni sana Mashariki, karibuni sana Makerere. I hope you will have a wonderful conference. Thank you. So I'm now going to be handing over to our incoming chair of the Mashariki board, as well as the current chair of the Department of African Literature, and our host at Makerere today as the convening team of the Department of African Literature.
Thank you, Mwalimu Msida. I came in today as the head of department. I'm going to leave as a wise man according to SK and the incoming board chair. Achitegedde akubire Mukama engalo ez'amaanyi. Our guest of honor, Mr. Bernard Mujuni, our Vice Chancellor represented by Professor Henry Alinaitwe, my principal, Dean, the keynote speakers, Professor Okumu, Professor Sanga, and Professor Hahiano, the Mashariki Board Chair outgoing, Professor Musila, Mashariki Board members present, the local organizing committee chaired by Professor Susan Chiguli, all presenters, our students present, ladies and gentlemen, having assumed the tag of a wise man, I will defer to another wise man. Chinua Achebe writes in Things Fall Apart that a man or a woman who calls his kinsmen or women to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. They all have food in their own homes. When we gather together in the moonlit village ground, it is not because of the moon. Every man or woman can sit in his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen and kinswomen to do so. I invoke Achebe's words as we welcome you to Makerere University and this conference. We are gathered here not because you do not have auditoriums where you come from, although I must admit that ours is looking fabulous this morning. We are gathered here because it is good for kinsmen and kinswomen, East Africans, to occasionally meet and discuss issues, literary studies and cultural studies. This is especially important because Makerere has and will always be a maker of African literature. Since 1962, it has always been that constant North Star of continental debates and trends in literary and cultural studies. This year's Mashariki Conference acknowledges Makerere's central role in defining trends. You know, the abolition of the English department was conspired and led by a troika, that professor, one of whom Professor Okumu is going to talk about this morning, which makes our theme, Aesthetics and Interpretative Practices Across East African Literary and Cultural Imaginaries, very important because as we stand here, we are looking back to past practices, you know, the introduction of oral literature, the coining of the term orature, Black Aesthetics by Pio Zirimu, and looking forward to what literary and cultural studies are going to look like in the age of artificial intelligence. This is an important moment, and I'm very grateful that you've joined us to have these conversations. Organizing a conference is a labor-intensive endeavor, and I would like you to join me in appreciating individuals and organizations that have made this conference possible. Our institutional supporters, including Makerere University, the University of Witwatersrand, Goethe Institute, CHUS, and School of Languages, Literature, and Communication. Thank you for the material, financial, and all forms of support that you've offered to us. Allow me to appreciate the guest of honor for making time to be with us. We don't take this for granted. We appreciate you, Mr. Bernard Mujuni. Mr. Vice Chancellor, you have always been a mentor to the Department of Literature. We appreciate your support, and we hope that what we do is contributing towards the university's vision of transiting into a research-intensive university. And I think this is the evidence we've gathered over 150 senior scholars in literary and cultural studies, and this is a foundation for what we want to become as a research-led university. Principal Hichire, we thank you for the material and intellectual support. Dean Namyalo, for listening and advising us, especially in the many activities we always dab in. Our keynote speakers, Professor Kumo, Professor Sang, and Professor Hiano, for accepting to share with us your wisdom and experience. Professor Grace Musila, for the intellectual and material support you've given to this particular conference, but more important, to the series of Mashariki conferences since 2013. Thank you also for convening the Mashariki Reading Group. And this is, as the Baganda say, the moment of Nkoko Yomutamivu. I'm inviting all of you to join the Mashariki Reading Group. It is an interesting afternoon when we talk and read and we share. You are all welcome. I might withdraw the invitation after the conference, but for now, I'm feeling generous. Thanks to Kari of Journal for African Cultural Studies. Kari is a friend and a supporter of the Mashariki conference. We appreciate, you putting yourself out to searching for funds for the writing workshop, and I can attest that many of us have grown because of those writing workshops that turned into interesting papers. Thank you very much, Kari, and we pray that you continue with that spirit. About 40 years ago in Uganda, we had what we called the Moshi spirit. I evoke the Moshi spirit, and I would ask, no, I will not ask, but I will pray, say a little prayer tonight for all the good work you are doing for us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Linda, Tina, Godwin, Jackie, of the the Journal for East African Literary and Cultural Studies. Thank you for facilitating the writing workshop, but also for giving a platform for East African literary and cultural scholars to publish their work. Thank you very much, and again, I commit to say a prayer for your good work. A special appreciation to the local organizing committee, aka the Department of Literature, Makerere University, DD, EOO, SK, DK, OB, ENM, ITK, ECM, JA, JN, SL, AKW. Thank you very much for the teamwork and tireless dedication to ensuring a successful departmental activities. A special thanks to Rita, Eric, and Jen from the PR's office for always coordinating with Grace the publicity of our activities. Okay, this is a joke. It may not be funny, but lastly, I thank myself for discovering that I'm a wise person, and on that note, I will invite Principal Josephina Hichire to come and invite our Vice Chancellor to make her report, and that is a gesture to the point that we are having a slight change of program. I'm inviting my Dean, Dean Namyalo w'ekitiibwa, tusanyuse nnyo okulaba.
the guest of honor, the Vice Chancellor, represented by the VC, F&A, our visiting scholars, distinguished guests, members of this university, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all warmly to Makerere University. I especially extend a hearty welcome to all our guests from beyond Uganda. I know that there is no gift as rich as precious to as the presence of a guest who comes with the intention to share and discuss ideas, because this is the very foundation on which mighty institutions stand. I hope that your stay at this university will motivate to have further collaborative research with us. I would like to commend the Department of Literature for organizing this event, which fits well into our aim to promote interdisciplinary work as well as inter-university activities and outreach programs at this university. The School of Languages, Literature and Communication is keen to emphasize these kind of ventures as we have already demonstrated last week by hosting the Language Association of East African Conference, LAEA III. This university has been recognized in this region for spearheading collaborative research platforms, and I'm glad that our school actively contributing to this needed research. Quite often, our principal says that the school keeps her quite busy and engaged. It is very heartening to learn that the conference has brought together scholars and practitioners in the fields of literary and cultural studies. In hosting a conference such as this one, Makerere University supports its aim to stay relevant, increase public understanding of university activities, and promote education as a tool of emancipation. I would like to end by saying that I understand literary and cultural studies as subjects which are very much part and parcel of our daily lives, which address our problems and joys and assess them. Subjects that allow us to discuss and dispense ideas, as demonstrated by the very action of organizing this event. I say again that you are all welcome to this university, and hope our guests will carry away inspiration from here. With this, I would like to invite our dear principal to address us as we build for the future.
So, if she's OHTWS, Professor Namiaro, you can take your seat. Good morning. I would like really to welcome all those that have come outside of Makerere. Just wave for us, so that we welcome you properly. Karibuni to Makerere University. The chief guest, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, hereby represented by Mr. Bernard Mujuni. The Vice Chancellor, Professor Barnabas Nawangwe, hereby represented by the DVC in charge of finance and administration. So I'm thinking that finances are going to begin flowing even more. Professor Alinaitwe, who is an engineer and was asking, what is the status doing here? And the professor of literature had to explain in terms of the beauty of language, the beauty of the person within. So you people are doing outside beauty. Literature is doing inside beauty. Members of the Makerere management, Makerere University management here present, the Dean, Languages, Literature and Communication. The school is not just making me busy, it is exhausting me with inner beauty, aesthetics. Our distinguished guests from foreign missions, our guests from other universities, but especially University of the Witwatersrand. For those who have been there, it is Wits Joburg. So if you haven't been there, if you are not an alumnus, you will not understand. I'm proudly an alumnus of Wits. So I'm so happy to see you around. Our sponsors, as you can see, it is a long line. I'm going to demand accountability. All of you present, our distinguished professors, our distinguished keynote speakers, some of whom are our teachers, we really welcome you to this conference. Mashariki. In Uganda, some people have phobia for Kiswahili because it reminds them of the other language that was used only when people want to do something that is not human. But we have to retrieve and actually liberate the language for us, for ourselves. Because as it was said in the last layer, the one that has just been completed on languages, the keynote speaker said something very beautiful and said, African solutions, transformative solutions will be articulated in an African language. So I'm happy to hear that notion of local epistemologies and local languages, and the fact that we can deploy some of those in what we think is the best for the continent. And so, fellow Ugandans, after 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you, what is Mashariki? So it's just Eastern. And ensure that before the end of the day, before the end of the conference, you have at least 6 words that you've learned, either Luganda, since the chair, the convener, forced us to have an interpreter, which she never delivered. So some of the Luganda words that were said, some of the Kiswahili words that are going to be said, and I think also Lumasaba, we can get some words from there that can teach us some of these things. So I really want to welcome you as principal, College of Humanities and Social Sciences, to this Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference. We hosted this conference in 2015, and we are feeling privileged to be hosting it again. And we pledge to even support it more, even if it is hosted by other people. So we are in together. This conference, in terms of the Mashariki Conference Series, seeks to motivate dialogue between regions, scholars, and stakeholders across the continent. And we are happy that we are sitting here to talk about us, about what makes us tick, and what we need to do to improve and even evaluate our journey going forward in terms of scholarship. I'm not a literary scholar, but I follow some of the works. And I've always wondered, why do we have African literary scholars and then other scholars? And I always said, maybe African scholars need to write more in order to attain the status of just writers and not this. But then I struggle with myself to silence the African side and say, maybe let me leave it to the gurus, the Professor DPOs and Professor Chimba and the rest, to help me sort out that puzzle. Why do we say African? And then when we are relating to others, I've not had European, Indian, but maybe I've not read enough. So for me, that is okay, it's quite an identity question, but also maybe it's something that can help us to push some of the epistemological questions that we are dealing with. So here in this conference, I see that we are going to really seek to ask pertinent questions about the direction of literary and cultural debates and policies fundamental to our existence as a people. And I'm happy that in the spirit of humanities and social sciences, we are not afraid to ask questions that will make us look into our inner selves as well as our surrounding. In the spirit of saving time, I would like to thank everybody, the school, the dean, the head of department, and the committee, all of you in your different capacities, the people who have done the visibility, the PR arm of the university and the college, to say asanteni sana as we build for the future. I therefore take this opportunity to invite, sorry? Oh, I'm inviting the VC. I'm inviting the VC. You could be doing aesthetics as our chief guest comes back. So I take this opportunity to invite the highest office of Makerere University. We are celebrating 100 years of existence. We are now 101. Is it the same with WITS? I see 1922. You see, I knew it. So as we celebrate 100 years, a century of existence, and also committed to taking the leap towards a research-led university, a university that is socially committed, a university that values African perspectives. I like to acknowledge the support of the VC's office to the college and to the School of Languages, Literature and Communication. So Professor Henry Alinaite, you're welcome to choose on the move. Thank you. Thank you for honoring our invitation.
Okay, thank you very much, my colleague, Professor Aichire, and my sister. The guest of honor here represented by Mr. Mujuni representing the PS of the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, the principal of CHUS, Professor Ahikire, the Dean, School of Literature, and so on and so forth, Professor Namyalo, the development partners, the stakeholders, the collaborators in this conference, of course the chair of Mashariki, and the outgoing and the incoming, all esteemed sponsors, invited guests in your various capacities, ladies and gentlemen. I'm standing here on behalf of Professor Barnabas Nawangwe, who has not been able to come because of other equally important assignments, and he has decided to delegate to me to come and represent the office of the Vice Chancellor. So it's an honor for me to stand in front of you and talk on behalf of the university leadership. As we all know, Makerere University is among the best universities in this region and also among the oldest. Actually, in East Africa, it's the oldest university. And we all know that University of Dar, Salaam, University of Nairobi were at one time colleges of the University of London, and in East Africa, it was headquartered here at Makerere University. So I think you clap for Makerere University for leading in the education sector that way. I want to welcome, to add my voice onto those who have already talked, to welcome those who are from, especially outside Makerere, those from South Africa, those from Kenya, from Tanzania, from other countries. I also see some people who may not necessarily have originally come from East Africa, maybe from Norway or Sweden. I see some Swedish faces and some German faces. I want to welcome all of you to Makerere University. As has been said by the principal, I'm from the sciences side. I'm an engineer by training and profession. And so I may not have the aesthetics in the language, the way I communicate. You know, you people who are dealing with the aesthetics in the language, I think you know how to package the messages well so they look sexy and attractive. Mine is just to provide the message the way it is. So you'll bear with me on that. But I want to also appreciate the courage. The courage of humanities is on the move. As the principal has said, you should also appreciate, or you should know that CHUS, the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, is the biggest university, university college, or college within a university. So we thank you, principal and the members of the college, for the efforts you are putting in place. Someone has already mentioned Makerere is aiming at being a research-led university, and these are some of the things that we want to see more and more, that we can do research, we can publish, we can disseminate within our agenda. And so I want to congratulate CHUS and the collaborators on that effort. We know, I mean, most of us, especially here in Uganda, all of us do literature at some stage. I remember I did literature from senior 1. I think I dropped it in senior 3. Ask me why. I was, of course, inclined toward the sciences. I used to do mathematics very well. So I found literature disturbing me, reading novels and novels. With the mathematics, I could just do a few calculations and I would get 98%. But for literature, I would struggle, read so many novels and whatever, and I only get 60%. So therefore, I had to drop it. But I want to remember a few novels that I read, those of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, The River Between. I think all of us who have done literature have read that book, and others. Those of Okot Bitek, Benjamin Mkapa, John Luganda, Rubadiri. We read those pieces of work. And as we all know, at the university, we say publish or perish. So the chairperson has given us, has taken us back to look at those who have already transited into another world. And you can see that they are still with us because of their works. John Nagenda and those others who passed on, we still have their works. So therefore, they won't die. They're only not with us, but they are somewhere, and they are still influencing us. So I want to thank you people for the work that you do. For us in the sciences, especially in engineering and architecture and fine art, which I'm more conversant with, when a painter does their work and it's nice and it's there, it can also live for ages. You know, if you go to some of the museums in Europe, you find that artworks of 1600 are still being exhibited. So even here in the literary world, I'm sure if you write a very nice book and becomes a masterpiece, even after 200 years, it will still be available for use, you know? So, I mean, we all read about Shakespeare. Shakespeare died a long time ago, but he's still with us. So, for us at Makerere, we want to thank you, the collaborators, want to thank the organizers of this conference. And maybe I should also inform you that with this kind of work, then all of us are promoted. Makerere is promoted. Makerere takes pride in collaborating with as many universities as possible and institutions, and it's partly because of such efforts. If the VC was here, I would have told you that Makerere University is the most collaborative university in the whole world. So you clap for us. We have clapped for Dr. Nabutaj. Let's also clap for Makerere for being the most collaborative university in the world. So we are promoting the institution, we are promoting our country, but also even individuals are promoted. And I want to inform you that recently Professor Aichile was promoted full professor. You clap for her. Professor Sauda Namiaro was also promoted from senior lecturer to associate professor. And I'm sure other colleagues in this audience have benefited from those efforts. Mine was to say thank you to all of us, and of course to show the face on behalf of Makerere. And now it's my singular honor to invite the person representing the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development. Thank you very much, as we build for the future.
Thank you so much, Professor. This morning is very, very interesting. Just yesterday, before I go into normally I do write speeches, but it's very rare for someone to write a speech for me. So it's a rare event for me to get the honor of reading a prepared speech. But being a student of literature and letters, you will allow me that I keep importing some benefits I enjoyed this morning from previous speakers so that my speech could be much, enriched. And so I'll go, the Vice Chancellor, members of university management present, the principals, deans, chairs of departments, officials and representatives from various partner institutions, distinguished guests from foreign missions, esteemed sponsors, invited guests in your various capacities, conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to convey sincere apologies from the Permanent Secretary from Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who is in the, out of the country. We have an engagement discussing bilateral labor exchange programs with countries where our workers normally go, the young people, to find jobs and employment. And I was privileged that, you see, not all accidents are really bad. So this was a very nice accident to me, that I got this honor to put on the shoes. I'll first acknowledge my mentors here. In 1995, when I stepped into literature class, by then Dr. Didi, as she was then, now professor, with due respect, and Dr. Abbas Chiimba were my immediate mentors. And I remember very well being intrigued with Dr. DPO because of her gray tunic and white veil, and then full of literature, when actually I had thought that she was meant to be in the Coventry. That was very intriguing. And I was like, okay, so literature can come out of, okay. But that is how diverse this university is, and it excited me to search for more meaning in terms of scholarly work. Just yesterday, I was the main celebrant as I was launching my first anthology, a book called Rabbit on the Pulpit. And I can tell you it was, the whole National Theatre was packed to full capacity with different denominations of people. It was an excellent function. We shall share the notes later, but today is not my day, I also know. So I'm risking so much. It is with great honor that I warmly welcome you to this celebration of culture, the arts, literature, and creativity. This is a dream come true where we can allow conversations about creativity, criticism, flourish in a space where we collaborate beyond our circles and borders, and move on to explore partnerships with colleagues from other universities and wider spaces. Thank you, the Department of Literature and your partners, for making this dream come true. Indeed, it's a little bit of nice gratitude for resonance. Part of our mission as the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development is to make sure that we transform communities. And as such, we are committed to doing this by promoting culture, cultural values and ethics, responding to man's search for a better meaning, which is everybody's call. Makerere University, through the Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Association, is actively carrying out the ministry's mission. We work with institutions that build resilient ways in which culture can be performed, preserved, and researched. As a ministry, we are keen to work with communities to promote our culture, our cultural expressions and experiences so that those after us can learn from the past generations. We must do our job to fill the identity gaps, transforming from one community to another, codifying our practices, our history is a huge, huge calling to this institution, but everybody. Especially currently that we are facing a lot of disruptions. Young people are not reading. Storytelling is gone. The storytellers are busy on their iPhones and gadgets, as well as the listeners over the campfire. Campfire is actually gone. And the African identity is threatened with a lot of interruptions. So we have to codify our heritage, our language, our identity. It's a big call. If you don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and with a different agenda. Personally, when I was writing my book, which is a very big metaphor, the rabbit on the pulpit is a big metaphor, as you know it. If someone decides to misinterpret it, you might not leave the launch ceremony. But I was contemplating about identity. And, you know, the students, there was this saying that the skill of the master is lost through the student's lack of it. And I think I did not disappoint my professors now when I came up with that anthology. But just to let you know that on top of that, I'm doing more 8 anthologies. I've been writing for the 8 years. I just decided to publish this year. And so I have volumes of work. I don't know how to become a professor. I think if I'm done with all the trilogy of the rabbit on the pulpit, I should also come close and associate. I don't know whether that makes me a professor. It is important to think about our cultural identity. This is because, as a ministry, culture is part and parcel of the metamorphosis. What we do differently from others and how they perceive us is important in mapping out ourselves and establishing our uniqueness, both as Ugandans and also East Africans. It is important that these debates do not end here. I'm glad that this gathering has brought together delegates from our region and beyond. I'm aware that this conference is deeply interested in creating networks in East Africa and generating knowledge within the region. Makerere has again taken its place in Uganda in working with the academic and cultural institutions to bring this conference to fruition. We are greatly proud of you as an institution. I know there's a lot that is happening now within our country and beyond. Leading this revolution is no simple task. It's a big calling for the university to play its role in shaping regional and international creative knowledge base. I also know that there is a lot that is going to take place in the next few days, and we hope that the outcomes will influence and position Uganda and the whole of East African region as competitive. One of the areas which the previous speakers talked about is Kiswahili language. I was lucky that I was part of the team that was negotiating the Common Markets Protocol, especially to do with free movement of labor and goods. And one of the issues which we had as a country is that Uganda is challenged with competitiveness through inadequate skills in Kiswahili. Eastern Congo is a market. They speak Kiswahili, but also they speak French and also try to speak English. Rwanda has moved up. Burundi is French and also speaks Swahili, but also speaks French. Kenya speaks, of course, Swahili and also some English. Tanzania speaks Swahili. Now, Southern Sudan is speaking Swahili almost more than Uganda. Now, when it comes to negotiating contracts and all that, we cannot be better at transacting across the board. And so you have a lot of labor from these other neighbors coming here and taking up jobs and involving themselves in trades, including petty businesses. And we cannot cross the border and take our skills or our trade potential. This is not a simple threat when it comes to regional competitiveness. And that's at the risk of being very selfish to Ugandans. It's a big challenge which we need to bridge in terms of language barrier. I thank the Vice Chancellor, Professor Barnabas Nawangwe, for his able leadership at this great institution, and especially for allowing the arts and humanities to thrive. The creative force put into conferences requires people who feel close to the institution. You and management have done this job well. The principal, the College of Humanities and Social Sciences has shown over and over again that the humanities and social sciences are here to stay. The creativity, debates, and conversations around real-life experiences here is one of those platforms that we have created and keep in place for the betterment of our community. The School of Languages, Literature and Communication, and the staff in all departments, thank you for keeping the banner at Makerere University. And I'm proudly associated both with the Department of Literature and also the CHUS. Professor here knows that we have been meeting on different platforms discussing contemporary issues, social protection during COVID, so many things. Apart from also going to a certain place where we all bow to the same God. But in 95, 98, when I did my first degree, I thought, yes, I had done a lot. 99, 2001, I came back to do my master's in human rights. We were the pioneers, actually. So Professor Rukoko and, the team there, very wonderful work. And then I came back in 2004, 2008, to do my LLB. You see how the ghost of Makerere can never leave you. It keeps you held wherever you go. It keeps calling you. And then, of course, later on I did my postgraduate MBA from Catholic University in Milan and, Uganda Matters University and all that. But I can tell you my writing, and I contribute a lot of papers, papers into the dailies and all that. I owe it to the skills that transitioned while I was here. The fire that was by then going on around Makerere University, I used to organize debates. I remember at University Hall. What happened to the debates? What happened to the knowledge, this fire that used to ignite the ambition within the student community? And that transition into the current contemporary leaders that you have outside here. And those were the leaders. That was the war of nurturing leadership. We need that fire to come back. And that I have thrown back to the leadership of the university. That is creating spaces. And now that even we have all these auditoriums, by then we used to convene in quadrangles, in the pitches, but we could make ourselves into a makeshift conference, and we would exchange debates and call contemporary leaders here. Winnie Byanyima, Dr. Besije, Professor Kagonyera, Miriam Matembe, they would come and ignite and exchange views, and we were motivated. And probably that's why we are who we are. But I don't want to deep here at the risk of being pulled off the pulpit. May the next 3 days of these conversations be not only fruitful, but also allow for further engagement with the importance of literary and cultural studies. With this, painfully, because I would have loved talking, really continue to talk, I want to painfully, officially open this 6th Mashariki Literary and Cultural Studies Conference 2023 for God and my country. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Another round of applause to our chief guest, and thank you so much, Mr. Bernard Mojeni. We have a little performance by our literature students, and when we're done with that, we are going to have our first keynote address. So our students, you're most welcome to the stage.
gigantic medallion of his visage, that dangled by the people's palace, let it with cranes and tractors be hauled down, melted and beaten into an image of me, I, Messiah, conqueror of the monster.
Another round of applause to our students. That poem is titled Edict 1, New Nomenclature by Timothy Wangusa, our very own, our teacher, our friend. We call him Uncle Tim in the department, and he's a living poet, and he's a professor of literature. He's been here, he's currently at the university, rather the Uganda Christian University. And we celebrated his 80th birthday last year as part of our centennial celebration as the Makerere University. At this moment, I would like to invite two people to the platform. One is someone close to me. Many years ago, she called to her office and said something I've never forgotten. And I'm glad to be with her on the same team currently. And she's my teacher. I still call her my doctoral advisor. And I'm glad to be associated with her. Professor Dominica DiPio. And then we'll also invite Professor Charles Okumu to deliver our first keynote address this morning. Thank you very much. Professor Okumu, I'm going to request you to please come to the podium.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. With the preliminaries having been done, this session has been turned into collegial academic discourse. And I'm very happy that our own guest of honor is one of us. So we are all at home. We are moving from the formal to the academic. And just as my student and colleague has introduced me, this is the time for us to speak of introducing our teachers and mentors. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Professor Charles Okumu, who has been part of the Department of Literature many years ago. And we fondly called him also CO, which, as you know, is our nomenclature. Professor Okumu is currently a professor of literary and cultural studies in the Department of Language and Literature at Gulu University. But before that, he was Dean, Faculty of Education and Humanities. Professor is a scholar of very wide excellence. His teaching areas include African literature and cultures, American literature and epic poetry. For me, he is really a consummate occult Pabitech scholar. I have on many occasions to Professor Okumu talk about occult Pabitech, right from the lecture theater, But each of these occasions, I get surprised with the new breadth of knowledge he brings to his scholarship of Okotpa BTech. And there are always new angles, surprises, and a lot of humor. And I'm already, without spoiling it, I want to prepare you for what is going to take us through today. Now, Professor Okumu also, for me, again, is one of those people I describe as human beings, a good human being in the full sense of the word. In my relations with people, for me, there are two categories of people. There are those human beings that you feel very comfortable with, wherever you meet them, and you can greet them because they present themselves to you as they are. And that is what you have been, Professor Kumu, if you didn't know. I'm spilling it today. Related to that, his area of research carries this aspect of him as a good human being, in the sense that he is a humanities scholar who is engaged with the communities around him. There is a particular research that he heads that gives back to the community in the sense of, Ubuntu towards the environment. He is a champion of environmental sensitivity. And we know what is happening in northern Uganda and elsewhere in Africa about human beings being enemies of nature and despoiling the environment. And Professor Kumu is one of those champions trying to return to nature what we have taken away. We have been talking about the importance of language. Professor Kumu is somebody who is passionate about promoting the Acholi culture through language. He's one of those, me included, who writes the spelling of Acholi right. He has always removed the H from between. And that really is the uncorrupted and corrupt spelling of the word Acholi. And I'm bringing this in the context of how interested he is in promoting the language. Now, before I conclude my presentation of Professor Kumu, who is also a freelance journalist, to say this is somebody who is engaged. When there is something to say of public interest, he does as a scholar. So it's a way of challenging us as scholars really to go beyond the classroom. But more personal to me is the fact that Professor Kumu was the professor, was the head of department at the time I joined the literature department. And that was a particularly difficult time. I regard him, I've been very, very fond of you without, I should say, quietly fond of you because you don't know that I am. Because you did something that I can never forget, which is to seek out this student who didn't report 3 weeks after the semester had started. Those were very bad days. And he wrote in those difficult days to find out what was happening that I didn't report to join the class that had already started. And indeed, I had not yet got my invitation. But the letter that came to me 3 weeks after made me pack up and come and join my colleagues. And from that time, I am here able to introduce you. So Professor is going to talk to us. The topic, the keynote, is the life and times of Okotpa BTech, structured biography and excursion into his creative writing. Colleagues, if you think you have heard a lot about Okotpa BTech and you already know about it, I want you to think again because it is an excursion it's taking us into. Professor Kumu, I'm very proud to welcome you here, and I invite all of you to warmly welcome him to take his place here. Thank you.
I don't know where to start, whether to start by thanking Sister for being so generous to me. At 71, when people say nice things about you, you feel good. Makerere is 101, I'm 71. And I spent quite a lot of time in Makerere. I joined Makerere in 1970 in July as a first-year student, and we had just become a university. We had transited from a university college to university, and I spent the next 3 years in the Department of Literature, doing many things. At the end of the 3 years, I was thrown at the deep end of the pool because Idi Amin, by some bad luck, chased away Indians. When he said he received a revelation from God that they should go. And quite a number of Europeans, our lecturers from the university, also left. And I was picked when I became a teaching assistant and was thrown at the deep end of the pool. Had to lecture to my colleagues who were just 1 year behind me. They were now in third years, and I just graduated. I just started my master's in oral literature. But they said, you have to teach them Caribbean literature and the novel. Very interesting. But I did. I tried. I did what I could. And that is how I became a lecturer, and I met, I think, quite a number of graduates who are here were my students, or were students of my students. He was a student of Abbas. Abbas is sitting next to you, and there are others. I'm so happy. Professor Abbas, I'm very proud of you. Professor Dipio, Professor Kiguli, Susan, I'm very proud of all of you. Professor Anes Ogwang is not here, but these were some of the early students whom I taught, mentored, when I was head of department from 1985 to 1989. Then, for one reason or another, I left Makerere and I went to South Africa, where I met Linda. Linda Spencer, I'm so happy to see you after so many years. And I spent almost 20 years in South Africa. We were together with Linda in the same university. Then we went separate ways. She went to Stellenbosch. I stayed with University of Pretoria until I came back to Uganda. And I'm happy to be here. As the guest of honor said, once in Makerere, you always feel your root is there. I almost came back in 2004 to the department. The vice chancellor then, Professor Sebufu, with whom I graduated in the same year, 73, wanted me to come back. And my joke was, I've been teaching less than 40 students, and you're telling me to come and teach 400. That was the statistics in the Department of Literature. There's no way I'm going to mark 400 assignments. I'm so sorry. So I joined the World Bank and worked for the World Bank. It was a good experience also. But eventually, once a teacher, always a teacher, I went back. 2010, when my contract ended, I went to Gulu University. This time, because strangely enough, I'd never worked in the north. I'm from Gulu, but I'd never worked in Gulu. So I decided to take up an offer from Professor Penmoge to go to Gulu. And that is where I am. That's probably where I would retire from. And transit from the lecture room to a semi-farmer so that I don't lose my strength. Somebody said, why are you looking so young? You're 71. My vice chancellor accused me to the chancellor. I said, Charles never grows old. And I told him, because I'm a snake. I shed off my old skin and take on new ones. So you'll always look at me. 5 years down the line, you meet me, I will still be looking the same. Thank you. Let me take the start now from the beginning. Protocol, all protocols observed. I'm very bad at that. Although for the next conference to which your principal has been invited, I'm the chair of the protocol committee, but it's usual I don't keep protocol, but let me do it. The guest of honor, the vice chancellor in his absence, the principal, the dean, the head of department, and all the invited guests, chair of Mashariki, a word which I heard, but I'd been dodging it, I think, for a few years now. Makerere has been saying, oh, the first one, 2015, said, come. And I hid my head in the sun, and I didn't come. But this time, the head of the department came and said, no ways, you have to come. And so I'm here this morning. Edgar, I'm very happy. I responded. And I respect everybody. Susan, when did we have 50 years of Lawino? 2016? 2016 was one of our big years. When we celebrated Song of Lawino, 50 years. The principal, the vice chancellor, said when your book is good, the guest of honor said the same, it will be read. Song of Lawino has been read, and Okot is gone, but I think the best eulogy was from Professor Margaret McPherson, who said when the song is good, even if the singer is gone, people will continue to sing the song. And that is what is happening with Okot. Sister, I'm not very sure whether I'm going to say many new things, but definitely I would say many good things about Okot. The wife told me, he is your friend. He was your friend. Remember that. So don't say those things that may, which between him and me are well known. So I will not say those. I'll keep them because I respect the wife. So that's Okot. I think this picture was taken when he was in Nairobi, when he had left Uganda, because the picture when he had returned to Uganda and became the director of the National Theatre was a different one. He was in a tie and jacket with a long whiskers, but I think he shedded them off after. And the books that are coming, Way Palawino is the first one that we wrote, but the second to be published after Song of Lawino. Way Palawino is the Acholi version. Sister, thank you for saying Acholi is spelled without the H. Edgar is here. He knows the battle that went on between me and other people. And so, Way Palawino first, and then Song of Lawino. We celebrated 50 years of Lawino here in Makerere, in the main hall, which is being refurbished, and then also in Kenyatta University in the same year. I should have brought the painting that I was given as a gift. I always wanted money. I always want money. But when they gave me the painting, I was so disappointed. And I had to carry it on the plane, struggling with it. But now I realize that is the best thing that I ever got. We're sitting in my office, and each time I enter the office, he's looking at me. So we remain friends, and that's the relationship I have with him. So the Song of Lawino, it is a well-known book. I'll not say much about it. Then 2 songs. When I saw the last performance here, just reminded me of Song of Prisoner, and reminded me at a time when I visited a school as faculty dean. When I arrived at the school, the students were playing the same game. They were, they were acting how Amin overthrew the government. And I got so frightened, I switched off my engine, jumped out of the car, and hid in the bush. Then I was told, no, it's just only acting. So when these guys appeared here, my heart missed a few beats, but it is okay. And it just reminds me of the demands of the 4 generals here. Destroy everything, start my name, do this and that. And I think that's what the prisoner who assassinated the head of state was supposed to have done, but he didn't. Instead, he was lamenting. And the likes of Ngugi are disappointed that although the prisoner assassinated the head of state, but he didn't take advantage of becoming the head of state himself. So 2 songs, Song of Prisoner and Song of Malaya. Malaya, when I speak about, when people hear Song of Malaya, they get very alarmed. Sister Dipio, in Gulu, I gave a copy to Sister Rosalba. She's the Deputy Academic Registrar. And you say, what are you doing? What is this nonsense? Oh, it's Song of Malaya. You think I'm a Malaya? I say, no, sister. With due respect, you may be a Malaya to God, but definitely you are not a Malaya to all of us. And so that's almost got me into trouble, but I always find my way out of trouble anyway. So I got out of trouble. So Song of Malaya is there. And when the Malaya says in Kiswahili, Karibu, now we're speaking Swahili, isn't it? A principle, at least I know a bit of Swahili. And by the time I live here, you'll have learned one or two words in Acholi, so when you come to Gulu, you'll be able to get your way, like Edgar, like the head of department. Somebody thought Karibu was the leader of the prostitutes. So he said, you know, Malaya tells all the other Malayas to report to Karibu and welcome all the guests to her room. But that's not really. Karibu is simply welcome, isn't it? That's the little I know about Swahili. I learned Swahili in a very crude way. Some of you know Honorable Mao. He's minister of something. Forgotten. Must be Minister of Justice. I think he's Minister of Justice. I was a student in Tare when Mao was born. And Mao's mother didn't know English. I didn't know Runyankore. But she taught me the little Swahili I know. And so that is my little Kiswahili from the barracks. And somebody said this morning, Ugandans didn't want to speak Kiswahili because they don't want to remember the times that are passed by, when it was the language of the soldiers. I'm one of those who did not want to because of the harassment. So being in Tare makes me an OB of the president. So be careful what you say about me. He was in S6 when I was in S1. But we played cricket together. That's how he remembers me. And I have a mark here, a ball hit, not by him, by somebody. I stopped a 6 with my head. And so he remembers. When I say, oh, cricket ground, he said, yeah, it must be you. Great. So that's the two songs. And I've also included White Teeth there, where there's the Chole version, which is Lakta. That is the most important book, as far as I'm concerned, because it was written when Okot was a student at Kakoba Teacher Training College, which has now become a university, isn't it? And Professor Gakwandi is there. But he did his studies there. I will come back to that. That's when it started. It was published in 1953, very long time ago. And there were two books that were published at the same time. One of them was by his mentor, and Lakta is very rich in language, but the translation, White Teeth, the translated version, is really a poor translation of the original. And it was done between two people, Okot's wife, Caroline Okot, and Lubwa Pachong, Okot's son-in-law for some time. And then the other one, here in the Hornbill, there's a collection of Choli stories, Choli narratives, that Okot learned from his father. His father was a great storyteller and also a dancer. So he learned from his father the stories. And I think this helped him in writing his first book, which is a narrative based on the story, the poor boy who goes out, makes some money, is coming back to get married to the girl whom he loved, and then he gets robbed in Kampala. I don't go to Kampala bus park because I remember Okeja was robbed in 1940-something. And so I steer clear of the bus park. And the artist, the ruler, I think there was a reference made to the artist, the ruler. The vice chancellor is gone. I wanted to tell him that the principal should not be afraid, and Professor Kayimba should not be afraid to say that aesthetics is also on the outside. Okot argues very strongly that the structure of a building has got that beauty, and that outer beauty should be reflected in the inner beauty. When I got lost this morning because of the new structures, I knew the other lecture theater, but then I didn't know this one, and I had to ask for it. But eventually I found it. It's beautiful on the outside and also beautiful on the inside. The inner beauty, the aesthetics that we are talking about here. So Okot writes a lot. And also in Artist the Ruler, there's a 2-page article that Okot wrote after Makerere did not appoint him professor of literature. he was appointed professor of creative writing. That unit doesn't exist anymore because it was specifically carved out for Okot. And religion of the Central Luo, this one he focused on the religion of the Acholi people as a group, and he documents, this was part of his research for his B.Lit thesis. This was part of his research, and he documents how the Acholi celebrate their gods, not the Christian God, but the traditional Jok, who is at the clan level, at the kingdom level, and then at the family level. And he also shows us, he discusses in detail, the opposite of the good Jogi or gods, the sorcerers, the witches, and other types of people. They actually recognizes all this. And so it is a very important and useful book. In Song of Laweno keeps making references to some of this. So when you read Song of Laweno, if you want to get the fuller detail, also read Religion of the Central Luo. There is the Luo of Kenya, the Central Luo in northern Uganda are the Acholis. And I'm happy Ministry of Education has now declassified Luo. So you either speak Leb Acholi, Leb Lao, Leb, Japadola, or others, and no longer the blanket term Luo. With a W, with a single O becomes a problem. And then you have decolonizing African religions. This is actually African religion in Western scholarship, where Okot discusses and disagrees with many of the theories that the older scholars had about Africa. Africans are animists, they don't have gods, they worship spirits, and all that. Okot met many of them in Oxford, and he disagreed with many of them. I've left out one book, which is a collection of proverbs, mere words, that is, he uses quite a lot. But now, that was my excursion into the books. Let me now get to Okot himself. Okot was born on mission land in 1931, and he says he was actually not born. He untimely kicked himself out of his mother's womb. Just like in Macbeth, Macduff says he was ripped from his mother's womb, because Macbeth had been told by the witches, no man born of a woman can kill you. So Macduff said, forget that jazz. I was not born, I was untimely ripped from my mother's womb. Okot's mother was in labor, and she was on the way to Gulu Hospital. And Okot says he was so impatient that he just decided, woman, just stop here. I want to come out of you. And he ended up being born in the kitchen of one of the missionaries. I asked Edgar to go and look at the house where Okot was born. I don't know if you found it. Yeah, he found the house where Okot was born, in the kitchen. The house has been restructured, but the main house still stands. So Okot was untimely born, and maybe that is why he also died untimely, only 51. Okot started his schooling, formal schooling, in Gulu, and I was told he was a very clever student. He never failed, but his best subject was not English, it was mathematics. The Vice Chancellor is just gone, he would have loved to hear that. His best subject was mathematics. But Okot also, at a very early age, was already aware of how he can help his parents. His father grew sugarcane and fruits, which is supplied to the missionaries, white missionaries. But he also taught in the catechist school. So when you read Song of Laweno, Laweno is talking about the evening speakers class or the catechist class. Okot drew that experience from his father's interaction with the school or in the school. So there is that borrowing. That's why I talk about the structured biography of Okot. comes from part of his lived experiences, and not just that. But and then one thing about him, I said he commercialized, or he did commercials for his father. Okot was clever in all subjects, but especially in mathematics. And the explanation that he had was that for him, he eats a lot of sugar cane, and he gets the intelligence from that juice, from the sugar cane. But what he was doing was convincing the other students to buy his father's sugar cane, isn't it? So that was just a clever way of saying, buy my father's sugar cane, and you'll be clever like me. And but he got away with it, and people bought the sugar cane, except that the father knew that the students would go and steal his sugar cane. So the father also had a story about the sugar cane, that there was a big snake, a two-headed snake in the sugar plantation. If you went to steal the sugar, the snake would definitely get you. The best thing would be to ask him, then he will give you the sugar cane. That was another way of selling and stopping people from plundering his sugar plantation. Okot excelled in the school, and he became a member of the choir. That's one statement. He became a member of the school choir. The choir was managed by Mrs. Moore, and Reverend Moore was a catechist, that was a teacher with Okot's father. So the wife ran the church music, and Okot was part of it. He was one of the key, I think they didn't have, what did they call it? There's something that you hit and you hear where the sound is right, tuning fork or something. And Okot sang the first line, and the others followed suit. So that is how he developed his interest in music. If you read Song of Lawino, but especially Wepa Lawino, many of the structure, the lines of the poems are technically based on the Anglican church music in Acholi. The structure itself is almost based because of Okot's influence of that. And I think one thing that I need to say is that Okot was not only good in class, but he also played football. He was an athlete, something that he carried into his life. And above all, he was a very social boy. He was not an introvert. He was social, and people liked him. The white teachers liked him, the black teachers liked him, and that became part of him. So everybody in the mission knew Okot. They knew him for being intelligent. They knew him for being an athlete, a sportsman, but also he was very handsome. I think you saw the picture. At the 51, he still had that. And that's what attracted women. The wife told me not to talk about it, so I will not. So, Okot passed his P7, P6. It was P6, Junior Living Certificate, which I did. Most of you are here, many of you are here, did PLE. We did JL, Junior Living Certificate, JLC. And Okot passed very in high grade. He joined Gulai School. Gulai School was a special school. And a lot of northern leaders went to Gulai School, including the late Milton Obote was in Gulai School. And Gulai School had some characteristics of its own. The founder of Gulai School came from rugby, and the school was based on the standards in rugby. But one thing that makes Gulai School different from the other schools is the system of harassment or hazing. And for those who have read The First Daughter, remember when Cassie went to school for the first time in the boarding school, she found that practice there as well. And the older boys, the boys in the second year, always use the first years, they harass them. But in South Africa, I think it has been stopped because there was an incident in University of Stellenbosch where a student was so harassed that he committed suicide. And so government came very strongly on that. I'm not sure whether it happened. But University of Pretoria, the first year students are lined up. together with the girls. The boys on one side, the girls on one side. And they're made to pick their partners for the evening, and they have to dance with them. My son went there, and he came and told me, Dad, I'm not going there again. I said, what's wrong? He said, oh, they made me dance with some ugly girl. I said, shut up. You were only to dance. You are not to follow her. So I'm not going to start paying fees for you. You have free education in University of Pretoria because I'm staff. So please don't go back. And the boy went back. Very obedient. Very obedient. And then Okot completed Gulai School and he was admitted to Budo. How many went to Budo? How many are from Budo? Yeah. Anybody from Budo? Nobody. Oh, what a shame. Because you would you would have known that Okot was a pioneer of the Nightingale Choir Group, and they call it the Glee Club. I was so sad to see Nagenda, his passed on. Nagenda was one of those who was in Budo with Okot, and they together were part of the founding members of the Glee Club, where the singing group, Nightingale Glee Club. And that was one of Okot's thing. But the Okot, as I said here, came from Gulu. He was a Mukopi. Susan, you said you were going to have a translator here. What is a Mukopi? A commoner. Okot was a commoner. Remember his father taught in the catechist school and grew sugarcane to supplement the family income. So definitely, Okot was not anywhere near some of the rich students. That's why even in Gulu, he could not associate with children of civil servants, children of chiefs, children of others. He was regarded, okay, you're clever, you're intelligent, you're everything, but you don't have this. You know, you don't have a name. There's no name. And that haunted Okot for a long time. And so Okot joined Budo. Fortunately, the headmaster was new, Mr. Cobb, who joined the school and opened it up to the non-royal Baganda children. And that is how Okot joined Budo on merit. And he also opened up the school to girls. This will come a little later when I talk about Okot in Budo. It was a very fruitful years of Okot in Budo. And Okot had two things about him that Mr. Cobb liked. He was intelligent, but he was also an expert. He was active in extracurricular activities, music, sports, and football. So this endeared him to Mr. Cobb. And this also paid dividends for him. But it also put him in a disadvantage in the sense that he probably spent most of his time in these activities and little on studies, because it was going Gulu, you'd have to light firewood. It's not that we are that bad. We have solar anyway. We have solar, but it will come back. Somebody should reset that thing. Yeah, the network was. But Okot's time in Budo was divided between the studies and other activities. But I think he spent more time because at the end of his school years, he did not pass his Cambridge. He passed in grade 3 and he could not come to Makerere for a degree. That is how he ended up in Kakoba. But that one thing that I need to say about Okot in Budo, Okot fell passionately in love with an Acholi girl, who unfortunately knew his background. He knew that Okot was from a poor family and she was from a royal Acholi family, and there was no way that Okot could ever approach her. But Okot did, whether out of big-headedness or just because of his personality. But he fell in love with this beautiful woman. He proposed to her, and she rejected him. Okot is somebody who does not take rejection lying down. He was an only child. Let me just take you back. He was an only child of the family. He had a son at that. So everybody paid attention to him, and he got his way around many people, including myself. Okot would get his way around me. Even after quarreling and insulting me and doing everything, he would come back and still get his way around. And he was not ready to say no to this woman. But instead of sulking, he went to his room and composed an opera called Achan. And the opera is about a poor boy who falls in love with a beautiful girl, and the girl rejects him. And he tells her in the song that, you know, poverty is not permanent. It's not a permanent condition. One day I will grow up. Have you seen the second name of Okot? Bitek. Bitek is Biteki. I will grow strong. That was his father's name. But there's now Okot writing himself into his book as well as in the song. So the composition that was performed at the Anglican Cathedral was the best that year, 1948. And the governor of Uganda had motored all the way from Entebbe to come to the church to listen to presentations by Buddhist students, and Okot's song came number one. Not that he came to listen to Okot's poem or song, but because the headmaster, Mr. Cobb, was his friend. But again, that gave Okot a boost. That was Okot's first break. The second break, of course, came with the publication of Song of Lawino. But the first break in Okot's life was the winning performance. And John Nagenda and others were principal in helping Okot to polish the song, and it takes one place. The song did not stop there. The girl was okay, she got her payback time. It was payback time. Okot became even more popular. She became envious of him. But since she had said no, Okot also turned his back. Even if she wanted now to come. He said, well, you say, you are so proud, why should I come back to you? I'm now Okot, the great composer. That was Okot. And so he came. But when he went to Kakoba, Teacher Training College, he extended the theme of rejected love into a full novel. Lakta, White Teeth, is based on this single episode in Okot's life. And the story tells the same story, just expanded. This village boy who falls in love with a beautiful girl called Cecilia, he cannot marry her. If he took a job as a laborer, it would take him at least 3 to 4 years, but the girl may have found somebody else. There were so many marauding men around, including soldiers who were coming on leave from the Second World War. They had money. And so he decided to come to Buganda, what they call the Banana Republic, to look for a job. He got the job after a struggle. He didn't get it. He got the job in Jinja, and he made the money. Unfortunately, he was betrayed by Elango. There was that conflict between the Langi and the Acholi, which apparently is still there, except that this time manifested itself, and this young man lost his job. He had already saved up to 800 shillings, and the bride price was 1,000 shillings. You would be happy to know that I also 50 years ago, I also paid 1,000 shillings for my wife. We've been married now for 51 years. I paid 1,000 shillings. I've not even finished paying, because we believe you don't finish paying dowry. Otherwise, what is there? Why would the father-in-law come visiting you if you paid everything? So you make sure that you don't finish, and are still keeping. But what I've spent on the family is 100 times. But let me tell you that 1,000 shillings in 1972, I was a second-year student when I got married. By some accident, my girlfriend got pregnant, and the father came with a big stick, a man of God. Say, hey, you can't run around with my daughter. Just get married to her. And we were getting boom, Abbas. We were getting boom from government. When I got my boom, I put it together and went and paid the dowry. So government made it for me. That's why I support government. I support government. But even though it was Sobote government, but it's okay. Museveni is the same. Museveni was also UPC anyway, so it's okay. So Okot, that book, Okejala Duong lost his money at the bus station, trying to get back. So Okot, there's a lot that you can read. Okot, the opera I've talked about already, and I promise not to read my slides. And then at the NTC, Okot joined the NTC after failing to come to Makerere. He got a 3rd class in Cambridge, 3rd class. So he went to Kakoba, where he did a 2-year training certificate in teacher training education. He did English, religious studies, and music. Those were his 3 subjects in Kakoba. But he also spent quite a long time writing, took time off to write his book. And he did not forget his sports. Remember, he said he was a very good athlete. In 1951, he won the big athletics meet in Masaka and was given the Victor Ludorium. That's when you win in 3 or 4 different disciplines. Then you are honored with a special cup. It's called a Victor Ludorium. It is Latin. I don't know Latin. At least I know English and Acholi. So that's where I stop. But he came back. And then Okot never lost friendship with Mr. Cope. They were very good friends. Cope liked Okot. Okot also liked him. So when Okot won the Victor Ludorium, he wrote to Mr. Cope informing him. When he came to bring the poem to him, he found that he had left for England and he was going to come back with his girlfriend, his fiancée-to-be. So he wrote a beautiful engagement poem. Okot had been writing most of his life. A beautiful poem which was translated, rehearsed by the Budo Nightingale and was to be presented to the new arrivant at the dinner table. I don't know, Canadian loan. That's why I asked, has anybody been in Budo? Is there any Budunian here? Because they could tell us whether the Canadian loan was still there. They used to have their meals on the outside, not in the dining room. But Okot didn't find her. He completed Lakta, which was published in 1953. It was first rejected by the Acholi Language Board because they said the language was very dirty. I think he had a spat-off with Professor Elizabeth, with Professor Macpherson, Margaret Macpherson. When Macpherson said, Okot, your books are dirty, and why don't you go to church? And Okot said to her, you mean people who go to church leave their thing behind, they leave it outside the church, they first go and pray, and then put it on. And it's good you didn't understand. Thank you. You take your whole self to church, isn't it? With that or that? Mm-hmm. That's between you and God. The pulpit, my friend here. You can add that to your poem when you write the next book. And so Okot was that great man. When he completed Kakoba, 1954, he was posted to Sir Samuel Becker, one of the first government schools. It was Sir Samuel Becker, Ntare School, Lao College, and a few other schools that were started by the colonial government. This time not for the children of chiefs, even Bakopis could go to these schools, and Okot was one of them. Again, his teaching subjects were English, religion, music. In the junior, because he had only a certificate in education, he could not teach in the senior section. The schools had junior 1 and 2, and that's where Okot taught. And Okot taught Taban Loliong in Sir Samuel Becker. For those who know, Taban Loliong was one of Okot's students. And then he married. He was in very great hurry. He married his first wife, Mary Anek, who was a nurse in Gulu, and he also continued to play football. He is great, and he played for Uganda, he played for the Crane, the Northern team, and the Acholi District team. So that is how, I will soon say here, that is how he went to England. And he composed Sir Samuel Becker's anthem, Sons of Northern Uganda, Arise and Shine, Arise and Shine. For those of you who eat maize meal, I think one of the best maize meal products is produced by a company called Arise and Shine. And this was borrowed from Okot's song. So, and he started writing. My contention, my contention that Okot started composing way Palaweno when he was in Gulai School, not in Buddo, not in Kakoba. His focus was on the novel, but he started. And his mother was the muse. His mother was the poetic muse. If his father introduced him to actually philosophy through the narratives in Hare and Hornbill, some of which are included there, his mother helped him to become the composer and poet that he became. That's what he told Lee Nichols and also Bernard Linfors in other things. So and his football eventually took him to England, where they played with the English team, but they didn't beat the English team. They beat the English Olympic team. We must always make that distinction, because the English team probably was too strong for them, but they did beat the Olympic team. And they played barefooted. When they tried to play in shoes, they were incapacitated. So they removed them and started playing with barefooted. The white man, the English people stepped on them with their studded boots, but the black man is so strong, he survived, and he still beat them in the game. So that's. Then Okot received letters of recommendation. He went to Bristol. Okot joined Bristol in 1956 in October to do a diploma. He did a diploma in education. One thing that Mr. Cobb noted in Buddo was that Okot was hardworking, and if he decided to do something, he would do it fully and properly. And so it's not surprising that Okot came with a certificate in education, but he did the higher diploma in education with students who would come, postgraduate students who would come with first degrees. And Okot passed cum laude. You remember, from his primary through secondary, it's only in Buddo that he was derailed. He didn't pass cum laude. So he completed Buddo, rather Bristol. And in Bristol, Okot met some of the religious teachers, the Quakers and the Catholic priests, who finally brought out of him what he had been hidden from him, the superficial teaching that is done at the church. In Song of Laweno, Laweno complains that many of the teachers don't even know what they're teaching. They just learn by rote. They don't explain. If you ask questions, they classify you as a bad person, and you are not given oranges. You don't write in the reverence in the father's car. Sorry, sister, I have to say this, but you read Song of Laweno, so you know it. Because of that. And Okot found out that some of the things that they were taught were not actually properly done. You should read Song of Laweno, chapters 8 and 9, where Laweno takes the missionaries to task because they are not able to explain what they learn. And so Okot finally rejected his name, Jekeri. Okot was baptized Jekeri Okot. But he dropped that Jekeri business, and he just remained Okot Pa Bitek. Either he's Pa Bitek or Okot. Except that the names still remain, because in his billet thesis, he uses the initial J Okot Pa Bitek. But otherwise, he dropped it because of this disagreement. So Okot completed his studies, but instead of coming to teach, Okot decided to go and do law. And why law? There were two reasons. The public reason is that law was good for politicians. If you want to be a politician, you should have some law training as well. It is good for you because you're then able to defend, you are able to hold others. So Okot decided to do law. But also, is that why the guest of honor is doing LLB? Mr. Guest of honor, sir, Do you want to become a politician? He's not listening to me. He doesn't want to hear me. Because after the master's in human rights leads to law, isn't it? And so we watch the screen. We will watch the screen and see where you're headed. But that was Okot's idea. Because Okot learned from the West Africans, especially Obafemi Awolowo, who was a lawyer and had joined politics, and they developed a manuscript on the decolonization of Nigeria, path to independence, and Okot also did the same thing. So Okot decided to go to Aberystwyth instead of coming back to Uganda to teach, to do law. And also because when he was in Gulu, the magistrate, one of the magistrates in Gulu, and Mr. Baba told him, you're a drunkard. Okot is always drunk, so don't worry about that. I can say it because the wife is not here. But he was always. And the magistrate said to him, for you, you can never be a lawyer. And Okot said, trust me, I'll be a lawyer. And he went indeed to Aberystwyth. He studied hard, characteristic of Okot. He passed law cum laude, and in joy, he wired. They were not using phones. WhatsApp was not there. Everything was not there. You had to send a telegram. He sent a telegram to Mr. Barbara that he had completed law and had passed. And indeed, he joined Middle Temple in London to train as a barrister. But part of the barrister's course called for 3 months training in The Hague, where he had to do jurisprudence. And while there, Okot met one of the professors who was teaching them jurisprudence. And one of the things he taught them that in the past, in the Middle Ages, they used what they call trial by ordeal or trial by fire. And Okot remembered his father's stories, where there are many actually narratives, where if you steal a chicken, you're not sent to my old friend Kanyehamba for trial. That's what the president one time said. Kanyehamba is good enough to try chicken thieves. But you were made to drink hot water or lick the burning or a hot metal. Usually it is the blade of the spear. And if you did not steal the chicken, it would not hurt you. But if you did, you definitely burn. The stories where 10 girls, one of them stole her father's chicken and ate it, and the girls were made to pass through a dry stream during the dry season. But the thief, when she entered into the middle of the river started flowing and took her. So Okot was so impressed that even the white people do that. So he abandoned the barrister course. That's why he was never called to the bar. There's a story that he was called to a small bar instead of the big one. And he came to Oxford, applied for a certificate in social anthropology, which eventually translated it into a degree. So Okot's years in Oxford were very colorful. I'm just going fast forward. And Okot also, because of that interest in law and relating it to politics, he almost joined the politics in Acholi land. He came when he was doing his field work in 1961. That was pre-independence. He wanted to stand as a member of the Uganda National Congress, which became Uganda People's Congress. Obote borrowed the name from the Indian Congress. And Gandhi was a great favorite of many African politicians who were looking to throwing out the British from their countries. So Okot joined the ANC, UNC, which became UPC, but eventually he could not stand as a candidate because somebody else had already taken that place. But so when you read Song of Lawino, I'm now relating Okot's life history to Song of Lawino to make it easier for many people to understand. The chapters that Lawino describes the political squabbles between Ochol, the DP, and his brother, UPC, it is taken from Okot's own experience of the Acholi politics of the time. I know even who Ochol was in the politics and who his brother was. I know them by names because they are real people. But Okot, of course, being a fictional writer, could not use names. And so Okot did not contest, but instead he went back to Oxford after collecting his data and presented his data. Okot had a problem because Oxford, maybe unlike Makerere, maybe, did I ever take you out for a drink? No? Okay. Abbas, did I ever take you out for a drink? No, I didn't. Because that was not allowed, isn't it? Even now, the principal would fire you if she found out. But in Oxford, it was a free-for-all. There was, good working relationship. Let me just tell you one joke. I met 3 of the professors of Okot, the Linhart brothers, Godfrey and his brother Peter, and then Dr. Wendy. Dr. Wendy is the daughter, or was the daughter of Okot's principal in Bristol. And though he was a district education officer in Uganda, so he knew Okot. And that's how Okot got to Oxford, to Bristol. But then the Oxford story, these guys took me, when I visited them in 1982, they took me on a pub crawling. We moved from one bar to another. They said, we're going to take you where we used to drink with Okot. And by the time we finished the 3rd one, I was drunk anyway. But I just followed them. And they told me something very interesting. Okot was a very good man. He had no respect for other people. And that got him into serious problems. So part of the reason why he didn't pass was this disrespect for his superiors. But he was a straightforward man. When you invite Okot for a function at your house, Okot would bring his nanga, his guitar, as it were, and he would perform. He would sing and dance. But then, when you invite him alone, when he comes with the other people, he would just turn around and say, you were not invited, go back, and he would enter in. And so that was not very friendly, even to his own friends. But that was the kind of person that Okot was. So there are many episodes. I'm not going there. But Sister DePio told you that I'm going to tell you many things you didn't know. So Okot failed, and the thesis is lying in Oxford, Okot thesis, because he did not follow what was required of him. But Okot came back to Uganda in 1964, and his first port of call was Makerere. Makerere gave him a job in extramural studies, which was then being headed by Gerard Moore. And Gerard Moore is important in Okot's life because it was Gerard Moore who actually saved Song of Lawino from being rejected, because word had gone round when it was printed that Okot is about to release a very bad poetry book, not written in the English, but written in Acholi English. And it was a very bad book. It would lower the standards of poetry in schools. And it was Gerard Moore's review of the book in the literary journal that saved Okot's book. And it became a success. I remember I said Okot's first success was the opera, Achan, and the second success was the publication of Song of Lawino, which now is a household name. At least that is what Professor Gikandi said in 1916 when we had Lawino at 50. And Dr. Benge also says the same thing in his joint article with Garuba, that Lawino is a household name. If you have not heard of Song of Lawino, then you have not read literature, or it has not passed around your village. And so Okot and this man. So Okot in Gulu, he spent more of his time in the extra curriculum rather than running the center. And of course, the white people who are his neighbors complained, and Okot moved the drinking joint from his house to Acholi Inn. You found Acholi Inn with the H. Poor Edgar. And now you know better. Don't trust me 100%. So Okot moved the drinking joint. But the greatest thing that Okot did, he organized a Gulu cultural festival for 2 years, 1964, 1965. And it was a great success. If you have a copy of Song of Lawino, see the preface. You read the names of those who were there, the composer singers, the great guys who were with Okot, and they propelled him into this greatness. Obote government noticed Okot and appointed him in 1966 as the first African director of the National Theatre. It was then called the Cultural Center. Okot became the first African director. And within 2 years, Okot had made radical changes in the theatre. He had technically Africanized the theatre, but it also got him into trouble with the expatriates who had been the dominant elements in the theatre. And they concocted stories about Okot, that he was a drunkard, he was a womanizer, even had a bed in his office where he would take women. But then somebody who worked with him said, no, that bed was part of the massage parlor. It was, it was not for Okot. But whatever happened there, I don't know. I wanted to ask Obote's wife, Maria Obote. Maria Obote is still alive. She's one of the surviving members of the board that dismissed Okot. And I wanted to find out from her whether it was true. But the announcement of Okot's dismissal was on the 30th October 1967. It actually came out in the newspaper, the Uganda Argus, of the 1st of November 1967, that Okot had been fired. Okot had been invited by Kenneth Kaunda, then president of Zambia, together with Elimu Zirimu. Elimu Zirimu did fine art in Makerere. If you go to the School of Fine Art, you'll find some paintings by Elimu Zirimu. Okot presented a paper that was presented, and then also Zirimu. But as they flew back at the conference, and also let me just not even go there first. When I talked to Elimu, Elimu said they also, Okot improvised a performance of Song of Lawino, with Okot as Lawino, and poor little Elimu as Okot. You could imagine, the height difference between the two. But what Elimu said was almost tallying with what people had been saying. So all the women went to Okot. They forgot about him, that he was also there. And I said, Elimu, don't worry, you are still alive. Okot is gone. But so give him the space. And so Okot, when they were flying, I'm about to finish. I'm not going to go any further. When they were flying back, they read in the East African Airways that Okot had been fired from the National Theatre. The chief had been fired, and Okot was stranded. When they got to Nairobi airport, Okot was supposed to continue to Kampala, but he got out of the plane in Nairobi. What Okot said was not true, is that his firing meant that he could not come back to Uganda. He said to other people he was declared persona non grata, which I read the article, and I read it very carefully. There's still a copy in the archives. Okot was simply dismissed. They could have come back, but then he decided to stay in Nairobi. And that's how Okot spent 10 years in Kenya without coming back, as long as he could. So Okot got out of the plane, and that was it. When I asked Elimu, did Okot tell you why he was dismissed? He said the things because of what he said at the conference in Lusaka about leaders who are not pulling their weight, but they found the opposite, at least from Patel Narendra, who was then the Speaker of Parliament and also the chair of the board. The reasons he gave were that the National Theatre had huge debts, and that I can agree, because when Okot had the Kisumu Festival, we will come to that, he also left a huge debt, and that things were not going very well. But they were not blaming Okot. He said, Okot is a good man. The only problem is he was not pulling his weight. And of course, there were other complaints that Okot was abusing his position, installed an Acholi drum in the compound of the National Theatre. He had brought the traditional dancers into the theatre. Some of them were dancing half naked. That was immorality. And I'm sorry, sister, the Catholic Action Group was one of those communities that complained about this level of decadence that Okot was bringing. Of course, it all tied up with Okot's morality. Okot was immoral, and I'm not sure whether that's true, but that is it. People can create stories. So Okot lost the job. He stayed in Nairobi. For 3-4 months, he stayed with the Njao, Elimu. Elimu, for some of you who've been to Nairobi, is the director of Paya Gallery. He displays his art there, and that's where Okot spent time until he got a job with the Institute of African Studies, and Bathwell Ogot, Professor Ogot, gave him a job. Then later, they remembered that he had been director of extramural studies in Gulu, and they posted him to open the first office in Kisumu. And when Okot was in Kisumu, he did exactly what he did in Gulu. He organized the Kisumu festivals, lasted a whole week. And I traveled with the Ugandan team, and for that festival, for both years, I was in Senior 5 in Namilyango in 1968, and I was the president of Uganda Student Writers Association. And so I went with a team of students from here, and we spent 1 week eating, drinking, reading poetry, and sailing on lake in Kisumu. Beautiful place, especially at sunset. I'm not doing commercial. So when you are on holiday, go to Kisumu. And so Okot did that. And of course, he left a lot of debts. In 69, Okot, at the end of the year, was sent off to Iowa writing school, where he spent 1 year. And while he was there, he wrote the 2 songs, Song of Malaya and Song of a Prisoner. Those were written when he was in Iowa writing school. And that was his accountability for the money that University of Nairobi spent on him. When he returned from Iowa, he was posted to Department of Sociology, because they think that his degree from Oxford in anthropology and social anthropology were partly in sociology and religious studies. But those guys rejected him. And Okot's problem has always been, where do you place Okot? In literature, in sociology, in religious studies, or where? And so, or in all of them. They tried. But the problem that came was Okot was stuck at the level of a lecturer. He was with Mushanga. Some of you know Mushanga. Mushanga and Okot would be invited for interview, for promotion. Okot's interview takes 5 to 10 minutes because he's abused everybody. He's very intelligent. Look at all the books are published. What are you asking for? And Mushanga would spend 1 hour, but he got promoted. Okot did not. And the thing is that Okot did not. His colleagues in the department were rejected him because he didn't have a master's degree. That was the only thing. And so Okot was so angry in 1978. Together with David Rubadiri, they went to University of Ife, which is now University of Obafemi Awolowo. Shoinka invited them. They spent 1978 and part of 1979 in Ife. And that's the only weak point in my knowledge about Okot. The little that I got from the wife was, she was of course very protective of him. But what I got from Arthur Gakwandi, who had visited David Rubadiri, was that Okot was more drunk than not drunk. And his health had completely gone. Because in Nairobi, he had a Ugandan doctor, Dr. Joel Okulu. He's in the Department of Physiology, who was his medical doctor, taking good care of him. But in Nigeria, he didn't. And one of the other things that I got was from one of his former students who said Okot was, very sick. He was taken to a hospital. When he was discharged, the first thing he did was to ask him to take him on a bicycle ride to the nearest bar. And naturally, Okot could not sit on a bicycle, and he fell off, and he got hurt. But he went and bought the drinks and brought it to him. So the story continues. Okot returned in September 1979 to Nairobi in a very bad state. From the airport, he was taken straight to a hospital, and he was admitted. But he had his potato with him in a big envelope. I think University of Ife had given him his package, and he carried it in an envelope, probably in US dollars, which was made to deposit at the reception in the hospital. But when his daughter, Agnes Oyela, came to visit him, Okot discharged himself. Typically, Okot, he discharged himself and asked for his potato, and he went to live with his daughter. From there, University of Nairobi, when he was able to walk and go to the university, he applied for contract renewal, was given 2 years contract and posted to the Department of Literature, but he rejected the appointment. And he came back to Uganda in September 1979. Well, naturally, he came to Makerere, and the story is known by some of you. Sister, you know the story? Some of it. Okot came back in 79. Abbas knows. He applied to Makerere. Makerere appointed him senior researcher in MISA, which Okot turned down. His mind was fixed in the Department of Literature. And when Professor Margaret McPherson retired as professor and head of department, the position became vacant. Okot applied for it, and also Professor Tim Wangusa applied. The two of them contested. I don't know for how long the interviews were, but at the end of the interviews, Professor Wangusa was given the job as professor and head of department, and Okot was not. Okot went mad. He raved and raved. Now you should read in Artist the Ruler, pages 9 and 10, the full letter that he wrote to Makerere administration. One of the things that I picked out was, how could you give this job to somebody who is not published? And here I have a wheelbarrow of books, and a literary brought the wheelbarrow, filled it up with these books, said, these are my publications. So what do you think? What is Makerere? The title is Makerere, Jesus, and something else. But it was not very bad. But this, I think, got to the University Council and other politicians. So the department was restructured, and a position of professor of creative writing was established. It was handed over to Okot. He sat in my former office as the head of department. And I don't know how many times he came. That would be speculation on my side, so I will not. But he hardly stepped anywhere. Okot was at the center. What is now Watoto Church was the center. They took it over from Norman. It was Norman Godino Cinema. The group of people, including Francis Odida and Apollo Laworo, one of Okot's childhood friends, who is mentioned in Song of Lawino, took over, and Okot was given the position of director of programs or something. He spent time there until Makerere gave him this appointment in 82, January or so. He took up the job. I think he got the pay. I don't know how often he came, but at the end, in July, on July 20th, Okot was announced dead. He died on the night of the 19th at night, but the death was announced on the 20th by his wife. She called Okot's close friends, Apollo Laworo and Cliff Lubwa Pachong, who was in Kiambogo at the time, and announced the death. She had brought the body from upstairs in the bedroom, put it in the sitting room, or they had a skin for a mat or for a carpet in the room, and that's where Okot was lying when his friends came. So that is Okot, the man. He died very early age. My conclusion is that he overlived his life. He overstretched his life, and it burnt out at a very early age of 51. And that's the man that we buried at the same place, the same church where he started his singing career. There's a song, I thought we would sing that one. There's Okot's grave. And Edgar went and visited it. He went to pay his respect at the church. And this is the picture of the church where Okot started singing. It was a grass-thatched church, very, very big, but it is now a cathedral. And that's where I also pray. I say I also pray. I go there every Sunday, which is good. It's good to pray, isn't it? It's good. There's all this story of being born again and the rest. I'm not going there. That's not my story. That's not part of it. But that is my friend, very good friend. Unfortunately, he died too young. Very good friend whom you had to be very careful if he visited you and you were sitting at the dining table with your wife and he's sitting opposite her, watch his feet. He would be trying to talk to your wife or your daughter. He did that to me. And I came back from England with a bottle of whiskey. I gave it to him. He drank it and finished it and said, "You stupid man. You think I'm your child? You stupid man. Bring another bottle." There was no other bottle. I tried to explain to him. So we got into his car and we were riding back to, I was in Nairobi as well. We were riding back to his home. And the car, a Jaguar, it just stopped in the middle of the road. And Kenyatta was coming behind with his convoy. And the convoy, they knew Okot because Okot was living on State House Road, where Kenyatta lives. They tried to get Okot to start his car. And Okot got out of the car and said, "Kenyatta doesn't pay tax. I pay tax. Leave me alone." And my heart leapt to my mouth and back again because I thought we were going to jail. But we didn't. They knew, the guys knew him. They just came and pushed the car off the road and Kenyatta went. The following day, Okot was driving again. But when he left in Nairobi in 1997, he donated, 1979, he donated the car to the Faculty of Engineering so that they could use it to learn how the British make Jaguar car to last for a long time. That was Okot, the man and his works. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Kumu. And from that rousing hand clap, I am sure you have not been disappointed by the new things you have learned about Okot. As a man, as a human being who carries to the extreme, perhaps, the good sides of being human and also the weaknesses and the challenges. And that is really a mark of who we are. So thank you very, very much, Professor. Before I pass the microphone to Isaac, who is really anxious to have it, I think Okot remains a big lesson for us for a lifetime. That's all I can say. Thank you. Isaac?
Thank you so much, sister, and thank you so much, Professor Kumu. When you listen to these things, you hear secrets about men you've read. Susan teaches Okot at our MA class, and I think I need to attend that too. Thanks a lot. And another round of applause to our first keynote speaker. We have 2 more left, and we look forward to a great experience in this regard. I forgot to say this. When you move up there, there is a foyer. The very first corridor on your left is where you'll find the washrooms. Either side, you can use either side to get there. We have tea in the foyer. We welcome you to tea. And when we are done with tea, we are going to go into our first break up sessions